The acid rain hammered against the transparent dome of the research outpost, a familiar yet unsettling rhythm. I pulled my environment suit tighter, the hiss of the seals a small comfort against Meridian's wild temperament. 3 months on this planet, and the volatile weather still caught me off guard. It was a beautiful world, no doubt, but an unforgiving one, much like its native people, the Zinthy. The emergency alert had torn through the quiet of my quarters just after midnight. A massive sinkhole, a gaping maw in the earth, had swallowed a Zinthy nest during the storm. The adult guardian was gone, but 3 hatchlings, tiny and fragile, were still alive, trapped in the collapsing cavern. "Dr. K, you should reconsider." Director Hayes's hologram flickered, his voice laced with concern. "The Zinthy Security Council has already denied our assistance. They're sending their own recovery team." I didn't pause in packing my field kit. "Director, by the time they get there, the hatchlings will be dead. I've spent 6 years studying Zinthy juvenile development. No one else on this colony knows what I know." "The Zinthy don't trust humans near their young," he insisted, his image wavering. "Not after what happened at the Eastern Settlement." I secured the last strap on my kit. "That was a tragic misunderstanding, and it's all the more reason to prove we can be trusted, to show them we can help." There was no more time for debate. The lives of those hatchlings were measured in minutes, not arguments. Our transport skimmed low over the purple-tinged forests of Meridian's northern continent. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting an ethereal glow on the twisted metal and stone of the Zinthy settlement below. Even from this altitude, the sinkhole was a terrifying sight, a raw wound in the earth, surrounded by the flashing emergency lights and the tall, segmented forms of Zinthy responders. The moment the transport landed, the tension was a physical force. The Zinthy, with their iridescent exoskeletons and multiple sensory appendages, moved with a kind of agitated, precise energy. Their movements were sharp, their focus absolute. At the center of it all stood a figure that towered above the others. His thorax was broader, his shell etched with ceremonial markings that seemed to absorb the dim light. "Commander Vexillar," my translator AI whispered in my ear. "Meridian Security Force. Approach with caution. High status." I took a deep breath and stepped out onto the damp ground, raising my hands in the slow, open palm gesture of the traditional Zinthy greeting. "Commander," I began, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "I'm Dr. Nara K, xenobiologist from the human colony. I've come to offer assistance with the hatchlings." Vexillar's sensory appendages twitched, a universal Zinthy sign of disapproval. The gesture was subtle, but the meaning was clear as a siren. "Your presence was not requested, human," his translated voice boomed, flat and devoid of warmth. "This is an internal matter." "With all due respect, Commander," I pressed on, "Zinthy hatchlings require specific nutrition cycles within 6 hours of experiencing trauma. I've brought synthetic nurturing fluids. They could keep them alive until your specialists can reach them." A low, deep vibration emanated from Vexillar's chest, a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a hum. It was a sound of pure indignation. "You presume to understand our young better than we do?" "I presume nothing," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "I only offer what knowledge I have. The choice to accept it is yours." I couldn't force him. This had to be his decision. As if on cue, a mournful, high-pitched trill rose from the depths of the sinkhole, the distress call of the hatchlings. It was a sound that transcended species, a pure cry for help. I saw Vexillar's entire posture shift. His protective instincts were visibly at war with his deep-seated distrust of my kind. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "The recovery teams cannot reach them," he finally admitted, his voice tight with frustration. "The cavern is unstable. The passages are too narrow for an adult Zinthy to navigate. This was my chance. But not too narrow for me, I said, stepping a little closer. Let me try. If I fail, nothing is lost that wasn't already lost. Vexlar's huge compound eyes studied me for what felt like an eternity. I could almost feel him weighing every possibility, every risk. The history of our two peoples, the future of our shared world, all seemed to hang in that one long moment. Very well, Dr. K, he conceded at last, the words sharp as broken glass. But understand this. If you harm those hatchlings intentionally or otherwise, the fragile peace between our people ends today. The weight of his words settled on my shoulders as I began to prepare the harness and ropes for my descent. This wasn't just about 3 orphaned creatures anymore. It was about trust. It was the first real test of whether humans and Zinthy could ever truly share this world, or if we were destined to remain suspicious neighbors, forever separated by fear and misunderstanding. As I clipped the final carabiner and looked down into the darkness, I knew the fate of our future hung in the balance. The descent was unnerving. My headlamp cut a single dancing beam through the oppressive blackness. The air grew thick and heavy with the smell of damp earth and something else, something uniquely Zinthy. The cavern walls were a claustrophobic maze of rock and twisted roots. The ground was unstable, shifting under my feet with every careful step. I could hear the faint, desperate cries of the hatchlings getting closer, guiding me through the treacherous passages. Finally, my light fell upon them. 3 small, trembling forms, huddled together in a small alcove. Their exoskeletons, which would one day be hard and iridescent like Vexlar's, were still soft and translucent. They were beautiful, perfect, and utterly terrified. Their large, dark eyes fixed on me, and they chirped weakly. They were hungry and alone. Slowly, carefully, I knelt down, making my movements as small and non-threatening as possible. "It's okay," I whispered, though they couldn't understand the words, only the tone. "I'm here to help." I pulled a vial of the nurturing fluid from my kit. The scent was designed to be calming to Zinthy young, a synthetic mimicry of a guardian's pheromones. One of the hatchlings, bolder than the others, took a hesitant step forward, its tiny sensory appendages twitching, sampling the air. I held out the tip of the dispenser, and after a moment's hesitation it began to drink, its whole body seeming to relax as the nutrients took effect. One by one, the other 2 followed suit. A sense of profound relief washed over me. This was the first step. I was here, they were safe, and they were accepting my help. But getting them out was another challenge entirely. I couldn't carry all 3 and climb safely. I activated my comms. "Commander Vexlar, this is Dr. K. I've reached the hatchlings. They're taking the fluid, but the cavern is too unstable for me to carry them out. I need a lift harness, something small and remote-operated." The response was immediate. "A harness is being deployed to your position, Doctor. Do not move from your location." His voice was still stern, but there was something new in it. A sliver of something. Hope, maybe? As I waited, cradling the hatchlings, I knew this moment was more important than any research paper I could ever publish. This was about connection. This was about bridging a gap that seemed impossibly wide. When the harness finally arrived and I secured the last hatchling for its journey to the surface, I looked up into the darkness, towards the world above. We had a long way to go, humans and Zinthy, but for the first time, I truly believed we might just make it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. It really helps us grow, and we can't wait to see you in the next one. The descent felt endless, a fall into the planet's very heart. My headlamp was a lonely spear of light, stabbing through the suffocating darkness of the sinkhole. It glinted off the crystalline walls, turning the treacherous cavern into a deadly beautiful jewel box. My suit's sensors screamed warnings. Toxic gas pockets, unstable rock. Every step was a gamble. "Dr. K, your vitals are spiking." Director Hayes's voice crackled in my ear, thin and tinny with worry. "Are you certain this is worth the risk?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Just ahead, a sound echoed, cutting through the silence of the deep. A soft, chittering call. It was unmistakable, the sound of juvenile Zinthy. Hope and fear warred in my chest. "I found them," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. The narrow passage opened into a vast chamber, a fragile bubble of stability in what was once a sprawling nest. And there they were. Huddled together in a small depression, 3 Zinthy hatchlings, so small, so vulnerable. The pit was lined with the soft, bioluminescent fibers their parents weave to comfort their young, a ghostly blue cradle in the dark. Their exoskeletons weren't the hard, metallic shell of the adults. They were a translucent, glowing blue, pulsing with a soft light that seemed to beat in time with their distress. My presence startled them. In a flash, all 3 sprang to their feet, their defensive appendages snapping into a threat posture. The largest one hissed, a sound that promised future danger, its nascent venom sacs on full display. One day, those sacs could dissolve a human's bones in seconds. "Back away now, Doctor!" Commander Vexillar's voice boomed over the comm, sharp and commanding. Even through the translator, his urgency was clear. "They're in a protection stance. They will attack." But I didn't move back. I couldn't. Instead, I did the one thing every protocol screamed against. Slowly, deliberately, I reached up and unsealed my helmet. A chorus of alarms shrieked from my suit, but I ignored them. The chamber's air rushed in, thin but breathable. "What are you doing?" Vexillar demanded, his voice a mixture of alarm and disbelief. "That is an unanalyzed atmosphere." "They need to see my face," I said softly, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet of the cavern. "Zinthy hatchlings. They bond through facial expressions. It's how their mothers show them they're safe." I lowered myself to the ground, sitting cross-legged just outside their striking distance. I held my breath, and then I smiled. Not a wide, toothy grin. That's a threat display to a Zinthy. Just a small, gentle, closed-mouth curve of my lips, a gesture of peace. The smallest hatchling, the one huddled in the back, tilted its head. Its long sensory appendages, fine as spun silk, quivered with curiosity. The hissing from its siblings faltered. "That's it," I whispered, keeping my smile steady, trying to pour every ounce of reassurance I had into it. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." My hand moved slowly, carefully, toward my pack. I pulled out a small container of synthetic nurturing fluid, the formula we'd spent months perfecting. Uncapping it, I poured a small, shimmering pool into the palm of my gloved hand and extended it forward, an offering. "Impossible!" Vexlar's voice crackled, laced with astonishment. "They have never accepted feeding from a non-Zinthy. Our own specialists have failed." He was right. By all accounts, this shouldn't be working. But driven by hunger and maybe, just maybe, by something more, a recognition of a gesture that wasn't aggressive, so unlike every other human they had encountered. The smallest hatchling crept forward. It hesitated for a moment, then dipped a delicate feeding appendage into the fluid in my hand. Up above, in the command center, the rescue team watched on the monitor in stunned silence. Even Vexillar, usually so impassive, seemed captivated. I could almost picture his confusion, his reluctant fascination. "How?" he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "How is she doing this?" Director Hayes's voice came back, softer this time. "That's just Nara. She's different. She lost her family in the Europa disaster. I think she understands pain across species better than any of us ever could." It took another hour, An hour of stillness, of quiet murmurs, of patient smiling. One by one, I coaxed all 3 frightened hatchlings to feed from my hand. By the time the extraction team lowered the specialized carrier, the young Zinthy were calm. They allowed themselves to be guided into the warm, padded container without a single hiss of protest, but on one condition: they wouldn't go without me. As we ascended, breaking through the surface and into the planet's alien daylight, Vexillar was waiting. He stood rigid, his posture a wall of disapproval. Or was it something else? Something more complex? "You removed your protective gear in an unstable, unscanned environment," he stated, his voice flat, every word a reprimand. "You violated 17 distinct safety protocols." I met his multifaceted eyes without flinching. The carrier with the hatchlings was safe beside me, their soft chittering a gentle counterpoint to his stern tone. "Sometimes, Commander," I said, my voice steady, "the things we use for protection just become barriers." His long sensory appendages fluttered, a subtle movement the translator interpreted as a gesture of reluctant acknowledgement. He looked from me to the carrier, then back again. "The hatchlings will require continued care," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "Our xenological specialists are fully occupied with the crisis on the southern continent." An opening, a chance. "I can help," I offered immediately, "if you'll allow it." Something shifted in Vexillar's stance, a subtle change in his alien demeanor that no translator could ever capture. A flicker of understanding, perhaps. He was silent for a long moment before he spoke. "Perhaps," he said, his voice no longer flat, but tinged with a new curiosity. "Perhaps there is much about humans that I do not yet understand." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about saving 3 orphans. It was about building a bridge, one act of trust at a time. Thank you for watching our story unfold. If you were moved by Nara's journey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales from across the galaxy. See you next time. For weeks, the Meridian Interspecies Research Center was my entire world. It was home to me, and more importantly, to the 3 Zinthy hatchlings. We named them Lear, Seth, and Mora, following Zinthy tradition. Every day they grew to trust me more, following me around their habitat, chittering with what I could only describe as pure joy whenever I walked in. I remember explaining to Commander Vexillar, who had made a habit of visiting daily, "Their growth rate has doubled, their exoskeletons are hardening perfectly, and their empathic abilities are developing right on schedule." Vexillar would stand by the observation window, his imposing figure a familiar sight. "You speak of them as if they understand." I couldn't help but smile as Mora performed a little greeting dance just for me. "They do," I told him. "Zinthy empathic abilities start developing much earlier than your scientists thought. They can sense emotions, our intentions." He moved a little closer, his compound eyes fixed on the hatchlings. "Which would explain why they respond to you. Your intentions are unambiguous." I was a bit taken aback by his directness. "Is that a compliment, Commander?" His translator took a moment before replying. "An observation. Most humans project complex, contradictory emotions. You do not. It is restful." Our conversations had started to change after that. They went from purely professional, terse exchanges to something more, something like friendship. He'd bring ancient Zinthy texts about their development, and I'd share my latest research findings. Sometimes we'd just sit there in comfortable silence, simply watching the hatchlings play. It was peaceful. Then one evening, everything changed. Meridian's 3 moons were rising, casting long shadows across the research center, when Vexillar showed up unexpectedly. He wasn't wearing his ceremonial armor. Instead, he wore the simpler coverings Zinthy used in private. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. "Is everything all right?" I asked, putting my notes aside. He looked at me, and his voice, usually so steady, carried a strange, heavy resonance. "The Planetary Council met today. The human representative proposed transferring the hatchlings to the Eastern settlement for more comprehensive study. A chill ran down my spine. The Eastern settlement. I knew what that meant. The Eastern settlement has military research facilities, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Yes. Vexlar's appendages twitched, a clear sign of agitation. I believe they wish to study their defensive capabilities, their empathic potential as weapons. My heart sank. These weren't weapons. They were babies, Lear, Seth, and Mora. That can't happen, I said, my voice firm, resolute. These hatchlings have formed specific bonds. Moving them now, disrupting that connection, it would be devastating. Vexlar moved closer, his towering form casting a long shadow in the dim moonlight. The air grew heavy with unspoken tension. The council was divided, he admitted. Some Zinthy representatives argued that allowing humans continued access to our young is too great a risk. It was all laid bare in that moment. We looked at each other, my human eyes meeting his multifaceted ones, and the shared understanding was crystal clear. Neither of our species fully trusted the other. The fragile peace we had built felt like it was about to shatter. I had to know where he stood. "What do you believe, Vexlar?" I asked softly. The silence stretched on, filled only by the quiet hum of the habitat and the distant light of the 3 moons. He finally spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "I believe that understanding begins with individuals, not with councils. I have seen you with them. You have shown respect, care." Then he did something extraordinary. One of his appendages moved forward tentatively, almost touching my hand before he pulled it back. The gesture was small, fleeting, but it spoke volumes. It was a bridge between our worlds. A surge of determination washed over me. "We'll protect them," I promised, my gaze locked with his. "Together." As we stood there, united in our purpose, the hatchlings seemed to sense the powerful shift in the room. They all came to the barrier of their habitat, not with fear, but with curious chirps, and then they began to move in perfect synchrony, performing a beautiful, intricate dance. Vexlar's translator struggled to keep up with the complex harmonics in his voice as he said, "They sensed something between us." It was their blessing dance, something usually reserved for sacred tribal ceremonies. I could feel a blush creep up my neck. Empathic abilities, remember? For the very first time, I saw what passed for a Zinthy smile. A subtle, fascinating ripple spread across his sensory appendages, a clear expression of amusement and pleasure. "Indeed," he replied, his voice laced with a warmth I'd never heard before. "Perhaps they understand more than we do." In that moment, watching those 3 little lives, I knew we were standing on the precipice of something far greater than just an interspecies research project. It was the beginning of true understanding, and we would fight for it. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of the journey. If you're as invested in the fate of Nara and the Zinthy as I am, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do not miss what happens next. I appreciate every single one of you. See you in the next video. The summons came at dawn, a cold official directive slicing through the morning calm. Nara's immediate presence was required at the Colonial Administration Complex. Director Hayes was waiting for her at the entrance, his face a mask of grim resignation. "It's bad," he said, skipping any pretense of a greeting. "General Marcus arrived from Earth last night. He's taken full authority over all xenobiological research." Stepping into the sterile conference room felt like entering a cage. General Marcus stood there, an imposing figure, a living, breathing reminder of the military might that had bulldozed human colonies onto Meridian, regardless of the native Zinthy's concerns. He looked at Nara, his eyes as cold as the void between stars. "Dr. K," he acknowledged, his voice devoid of warmth. "Your work with the Zinthy specimens has been noted." The word specimens scraped against Nara's nerves. They're not specimens, she corrected, her own voice firm, unwavering. They're orphaned hatchlings under joint human Zinthy protection. Marcus ignored her, sliding a data pad across the polished table. The screen glowed with official text. New directives from High Command. The hatchlings are to be transferred to Facility 7 for enhanced research. Their unique empathic abilities have significant tactical applications. The euphemism hung in the air, thick and suffocating. You mean weapons research? Nara stated, the words tasting like ash. I mean security applications, Marcus countered, his gaze unflinching. For decades, the Zinthy have concealed the full extent of their telepathic capabilities. We've been operating in the dark. These hatchlings represent our first real opportunity to understand what we're truly dealing with. Nara pushed the datapad back towards him, a small act of defiance. I won't allow it. The Zinthy's empathic connections are deeply personal. The hatchlings have formed specific individual bonds with us, with each other. Moving them, subjecting them to your enhanced research, would cause irreparable psychological damage. It's cruel. This isn't a request, Doctor, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. The transfer begins at 600 tomorrow. Be ready. The walk back to the research center felt like a death march. Each step was heavy, laden with the impending doom she felt in her gut. When she arrived, she wasn't surprised to find Vexillar already there. His tall, insectoid frame was rigid with a tension that seemed to vibrate in the very air around him. You've heard, she said, not as a question, but as a statement of shared dread. The Zinthy Council received an official notification, Vexillar's translator relayed, his own voice a low series of clicks and whistles beneath it. They have issued a counter-directive. He paused, and the weight of that pause was heavier than a collapsing star. If humans attempt to claim the hatchlings for military research, our forces are ordered to neutralize them. The word hit Nara like a physical blow. Kill them? She whispered, the horror of it making her voice tremble. They're just babies. Better dead than to be forged into weapons used against their own kind, Vexillar replied. The translator conveyed the grim logic, but Nara could hear the agony in Vexillar's underlying clicks. He took no pleasure in this brutal directive. Nara stumbled towards the observation window, her legs feeling weak. Inside the nursery, the 6 small hatchlings were huddled together, their delicate forms trembling. They could feel the storm of negative emotions swirling outside their enclosure. They sensed the conflict, the fear, the anger. There has to be another way, she insisted, her voice gaining strength, fueled by a desperate hope. Look at them, Vexillar. They represent everything we could be. Coexistence, mutual understanding, a future. We can't let our governments destroy that. Vexillar's long, multi-jointed appendages twitched, a gesture his translator struggled with before settling on deep conflict. The directives are clear, Nara. The lines have been drawn. By morning, either your military takes them, or my people ensure they cannot. A chilling question formed on Nara's lips. And us? She asked softly, her gaze still fixed on the hatchlings. What happens to what we've built here? This bridge between our worlds? The translator hesitated, a rare moment of electronic uncertainty, as if the AI was struggling to process the raw, complex emotion in Vexillar's response. We return to our separate worlds, Nara K, the synthetic voice finally said. The bridge between us burns. Something shattered inside her at those words. Months of patient, careful work. Months of building trust, not just between 2 species, but between 2 individuals who had discovered an unexpected, profound connection in this shared mission. It couldn't all end in fire and ash. No, she said, her voice ringing with newfound resolve. She turned from the window to face him directly, a desperate plan crystallizing in her mind. I won't accept that. Neither of those options is acceptable. She took a deep breath. Help me get them out of here. Tonight. We can hide them. Somewhere neither of our sides can find them. At least until this political storm passes. Vexillar's posture went rigid. That would be treason, he said, the translator relaying the stark reality of her proposal. But the conviction in his own clicks and whistles was gone. For both of us, Nara agreed, her heart pounding. But we've talked about this, remember? Sometimes true protection means breaking the rules. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken possibilities. As if sensing the pivotal moment, the largest of the hatchlings, Lear, the one who had bonded most closely with both Nara and Vexillar, pressed a small appendage against the transparent barrier. It wasn't just a simple touch. It was a wave of pure, unfiltered emotion that washed over both of them. A wordless, desperate plea for help, for sanctuary. The plea broke through Vexillar's conflict. His posture shifted, his formidable frame straightening with decision. The tension in his body transformed into a readiness for action. "The western caves," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "My ancestral clan maintains a hidden sanctuary there. It is shielded from most forms of detection. We can reach it before dawn if we leave now." A surge of relief, so powerful it almost made her dizzy, flooded through Nara. As they turned to the control panel to begin the frantic, hurried preparations for their escape, their hands brushed against each other. For a long moment, neither of them pulled away. In that shared touch, a new pact was sealed, not of duty or orders, but of a shared purpose, a shared hope, and a shared rebellion against the worlds that sought to tear them apart. The bridge wouldn't burn tonight. Tonight they would become its guardians. Thank you so much for watching. This story is just getting started, and the journey of Nara, Vexillar, and the hatchlings is going to be a wild one. If you want to find out what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do not miss a single chapter. We'll see you in the next one. The ancient Zinthy transport hummed, a low thrumming that vibrated through the floor plates as Vexillar guided it low over Meridian's western mountain range. Dawn was breaking, painting the horizon with magnificent stripes of amber and violet, a sight that on any other day would have filled me with wonder. Today, it just felt like a timer, counting down the moments until our absence was discovered. In the cargo hold, the three hatchlings rested peacefully in their portable habitats, their small forms rising and falling with each breath. They were surprisingly calm, considering the chaos of our hasty evacuation. I knelt, checking their vital signs on the monitor. All green. "They trust us," I observed, my voice a quiet murmur in the stillness of the hold. Even now. Vexillar's appendages, those strange, elegant limbs, moved in a complex pattern that I'd come to recognize as his unique expression of wonder. His synthesized voice filled the space. "They sense our intention to protect them. Pure emotion, Nara. It transcends species barriers. Ahead, our destination materialized out of the mountain fog, a massive cave entrance, almost perfectly hidden by a curtain of indigenous vegetation. As the transport settled onto a natural landing platform, a jolt of realization went through me. This wasn't just some remote hideout. The entrance led into an ancient Zinthy settlement, a breathtaking sight of bioluminescent pathways and massive crystalline structures that grew out of the natural rock itself, casting a soft, ethereal glow. "My ancestors dwelled here for generations," Vexillar explained, his voice echoing with a reverence I'd never heard before. "He helped me secure the hatchlings for transport. This was before the treaties, before humans. Few even remember its existence. We worked quickly, our movements efficient and synchronized. Deep within the cave system, we established a nurturing space for the hatchlings, a small haven of warmth and safety. By mid-morning, just as we finished, the inevitable happened. Both of our communications devices began to chime, a frantic, urgent chorus of incoming messages. I pulled out the encrypted channel Director Hayes had given me. "They've discovered we're gone," I said, my heart sinking as I scrolled through the alerts. "And it looks like both sides are displeased." Vexillar's translator emitted a sound that was a surprisingly close approximation of a bitter human laugh. A diplomatic understatement, I believe. And he was right. Outside our hidden sanctuary, the complex political machinery of Meridian whirred into frantic motion. We could almost picture it, the search parties fanning out, the accusations flying back and forth in emergency councils, all the predictable chaos of rigid bureaucracies confronted with unexpected defiance. They would paint us as traitors, kidnappers. But here, in the heart of this ancient place, we knew the truth. We were protectors. The days blurred into a new kind of routine. The hatchlings thrived in the sanctuary, their growth accelerating in this natural, stress-free environment. They were curious, playful, and utterly fascinating. Vexillar and I fell into a rhythm of our own. We shared knowledge, stories of our vastly different upbringings, and meals prepared from our respective traditions. It was a strange and wonderful cultural exchange, happening in secret at the edge of the known world. We were two fugitives from two species, finding common ground. One evening, we were sitting by a crystalline pool, its water shimmering with captured light. The hatchlings were exploring its shallow edges, their happy chirps echoing in the vast cavern. Vexillar's appendage brushed against my shoulder in a gesture the translator identified simply as affection/protection. The sudden, gentle contact sent a warmth through me that had nothing to do with the cave's ambient temperature. "The Zinthy Council has requested direct communication," he said, his tone serious. "They wish to negotiate." I looked up at his towering form, surprised. "Negotiate? Not demand our surrender? Not threaten us with oblivion?" Vexillar shifted slightly. Our departure created an unexpected outcome. Neither side wishes to publicly acknowledge that individuals from both species chose loyalty to each other over their loyalty to authority. It is embarrassing for them. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest, small but fierce. "And the hatchlings?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "What do they propose for them?" "They propose a joint guardianship program," Vexillar replied, and I could feel the significance of his words. "No military research, no separation." A smile broke across my face, unbidden and wide. It was everything we had risked our lives for. That's what we wanted all along." "There is more," Vexillar added. His posture shifted again, a subtle arrangement of his limbs that I now recognized as nervous anticipation. "They wish to establish a permanent cross-species research team, the first of its kind." A laugh escaped me, light and full of disbelief. "Let me guess," I said, a warmth spreading through my entire being. "With us as its leaders?" A ripple of what could only be described as pleasure moved across Vexillar's sensory appendages. "Indeed, they believe our connection has scientific value." I held his gaze, or at least the part of him that served as a face. "Is that all it has, Vexillar? Scientific value?" I asked softly. The translator paused for a fraction of a second, as if searching for the right words. Finally, it spoke. "There is no direct equivalent in your language for what the Zinthy call ka-verith. It describes souls who find resonance across physical difference." He reached toward me then, and his appendages, which could crush stone, gently touched my face in the traditional Zinthy gesture of deepest intimacy. It was a touch more profound than any I had ever known. "But I believe," his voice modulator whispered, "that humans have a similar concept." "We do," I whispered back, leaning into his touch, closing my eyes. Above us, unseen through the rock, Meridian's 3 moons aligned in a rare celestial event. one the Zinthy considered profoundly auspicious. A new beginning. As if sensing the emotional shift, the hatchlings approached us, their movements synchronized in a pattern that signified acceptance and blessing. 3 days later, a joint delegation arrived at the sanctuary. Director Hayes represented the humans, her face a mixture of stern relief and grudging respect. Elder Tixana, a revered Zinthy leader, stood beside her. They came not with demands or soldiers, but with formal recognition of what Vexillar and I had proven, that understanding could transcend biology, that a genuine connection could bridge worlds. As the delegation's shuttle departed, its engines a distant hum, I stood at the entrance to the sanctuary. The hatchlings chattered excitedly around my feet, nipping playfully at my boots. Vexillar came to stand beside me, his towering form casting a protective shadow that felt like a comfort, not a threat. "What happens now?" I asked, looking out at the alien landscape that was starting to feel like home. "Now," he said, his translator conveying the deep warmth in his harmonic tones, "we build something new." Just then, Lear, the largest of the hatchlings, positioned himself directly between us, a living, breathing, symbolic bridge between our two worlds. In that single, perfect moment, I understood. What had begun as a desperate, frantic rescue had transformed into something far more significant. It was the first tentative step toward genuine coexistence, a future neither of our species had ever dared to imagine was possible. Under Meridian's alien sky, surrounded by the whispered promises of that future, I reached out and took Vexillar's appendage, holding it gently in my human hand. Two worlds, touching, beginning again. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more tales from across the galaxy. We'll see you in the next one.